Welcome to Spirit Baby Radio. You are about to join a frequency that will open your mind, expand your heart, and activate your spirit. Thank you for joining Kelly Meehan, Spirit Baby Medium and Master Energy Therapist. Kelly believes in the power of the Spirit Baby. She speaks with babies in spirit before life, in the womb, and after life. She supports, teaches, and guides others to tune into the intuitive and mystical parts of life for greater wisdom. Join her in meeting your soul baby and build your connection and relationship with deep love and trust. Welcome to Spirit Baby Radio with your host, Spirit Baby Medium, Kelly.
Welcome to episode 55, January 25th, 2019. Feminine Spirituality, the Health of Womb Wisdom. Are you aware of your spirit, mind, and womb connection? What does your body want to share with you? How can you create a relationship with womb awareness for conception and pregnancy? I have a special guest, Sama Morningstar. Hello.
Hello.
Sama is a womb awakening mentor and feminine embodiment specialist. She's the founder of an online community, the Womb-Centered Healing Temple, in which she enjoys collaborating and serving womb-centered healing enthusiasts from around the world. Her whole life has been the preparation for the sacred calling to help women recognize, access, and activate the power of their wombs, awakening and celebrating their true femininity so they can live with abundant energy, vibrant health, material, emotional, and spiritual wealth, and nurture satisfying intimate relationships. Thank you for being here. And we were just talking, and you know, how did we meet? How did we connect? I always feel like that's always fun to see, you know, where my special guests come from. And I always feel like we're like Facebook buddies. And we were just talking about, you know, in the birth community and, of course, the womb, right? And I know some of you do more than just birth stuff, right? You do so much stuff.
Yeah, well, I think we may have met actually in person. I lived in Long Beach for about 8 months, several years back, or 7 months. During a period of time when my husband lived down there and we're helping out a family member who was getting ready to pass, actually. And so I was also involved in the birth community down there. So we may have met at, you know, a birth workers networking event or something like that.
I feel like that was the day. There were so many great networking events years ago at like Cedar Sinai and all these like, you know, birth centers. Now I don't think they happen anymore. I don't see them.
Possibly not.
Yeah, different times. But yeah, thank you. I want to, you know, there's so many questions I have. Just basic, just to start off with, womb awakening mentor, feminine embodiment specialist. I want you to share what does that mean?
Well, it's interesting because a few years now I've been working with my own womb for a long time, over 20 years. Mm-hmm. And it started because I was feeling like here I was in my mid-30s or my early 30s, you know, unable to sustain intimate relationship past the 3-month infatuation phase, right? And I was feeling like if I don't really look into what's going on for me, this is going to be the story of my life, and I'm not satisfied with that. And I have a lot of sexual energy, a lot of potency in that, in my sexuality, my sensuality, and I wanted to be able to share that with others and also have it be, not others as in lots of people, but with someone who would be a partner, a life partner, and have a depth of intimacy. That was a deep longing for me. And I knew that I needed to do some inner healing work, and so I picked up my life and dropped everything and moved to a hot springs community where there was a big focus on tantra and sexual healing. And I started drawing these drawings of my womb and my heart. Like I'd get a big piece of black paper and get out all the reds and pink pastels, and would draw my womb and my heart and all these, blood vessels connecting them and all this, right? And so it was very clear to me that my womb was central, and bringing healing energy to the womb space was central to this whole thing. And so the first 10 or 15 years of that exploration involved finding my life partner eventually, after going through the first wave of healing that really had to do with my emotional body and how I interacted with people and how my emotional baggage pushed people away and prevented me from having intimacy. So my womb healing was very much centered on that kind of emotional healing from the get-go. And then as far as, healing my menstrual cycle, so it wasn't as painful and all of that, I focused on dietary change and as well as the emotional side of things through somatic practices of yoga and breath work and things like that. And no one, though, was calling that womb healing. I knew it was, because I knew that was the center of what was going on for me. And I also did a lot of healing from my early childhood trauma, my childbirth, how I was born. My mother I was a teenage pregnancy that narrowly averted being a Mexican abortion. Okay. So my mom had to keep me a secret because she knew her mom would force her to take her to Mexico for an illegal abortion at that time. And so I was the secret baby, and it wasn't even like a love child scenario. My father was irresponsible. He was doing drugs and he was a musician and all this, right? So my mom got his number quite quickly and, knew that he wasn't going to be fatherhood material. So she was a single mom at 17 at a time when that was, a big no-no in a Catholic family. And, it was just a lot of emotional stress and strain for her. So as I did my own healing process, it really became clear that I was carrying in my womb a lot of her fear and pain. And that's been central to my approach to healing is, okay, can I differentiate what belongs to me to process and what actually belongs to my mother? And that's central to the work that I do with folks today in the womb awakening work. So all of that went on without really having an explicit name of womb awakening. And I was studying with yoga teachers and building a yoga ashram out in the woods, and with a small community of people that were all doing somatic-based healing, but nobody was, and honoring in a certain way divine feminine, for sure, divine feminine, and honoring femininity as something highly undervalued in society, but highly valuable in reality. And so, and that potentially our wombs had some greater power than was recognized, but no one was explicitly developing that. It was just sort of, we know that women are more powerful than society lets on to be, and that menstruation could actually be instead of a hindrance to our awakening, an actual central aspect of the awakening process. There was, we even talked about that sometimes, but no one ever really developed or dove into that very extensively at all. And so when I left that ashram and started to explore what it was that I was offering myself, what was rising through me, I started reading all kinds of books about womb healing, having my own experiences of my womb talking to me. I was going through a health crisis at that time where my energy levels would just drop out the bottom. where, I'm a massage therapist, and my back went out at one point, and my low back, and I couldn't walk for 2 weeks, and my acupuncturist told me that she couldn't feel my kidney energy at all. And if you're familiar with Chinese medicine, the kidneys is where it's considered that we store our life force vitality, and that we get there's a certain quality of vitality of life force called Jing. There's a life force. Qi is something that we can replenish easily by eating certain foods and by various activities, and we spend it and we get it back like that. But the Jing is like a bank account that you get when you're born. And if you spend it, it's very much more difficult to get it back. And so I was concerned that somehow I had done 10 or so more years of regular fasting and low-fat vegan food and cleansing and all of this for a long time. And, you can only scrub a pot so long until it starts to get a hole in it, And I had come out with no kidney energy left. My acupuncturist was very concerned, because she couldn't feel my kidney energy at all. And I was concerned too, and yet, I needed to keep going to work, and being a massage therapist, that a friend of mine says, she was quitting massage because it takes up too many of her soul points, which I felt was another way of saying your bank account of energy, right? And I needed to keep going to work, and my back kept going out after I recovered from that first bout. And I kept meditating on my womb space, and one morning I woke up and my womb was telling me, I just heard this voice inside of me saying, I can give you all the energy that you need. And I said, okay, that is a powerful message. And it began to come clear to me that here we have this womb space, this womb inside of us as women that can nurture a whole new life inside of us. And so it's a life-generating organ, like more than any other organ in the body. Tremendously more. It can generate the life force and channel the spirit of a new human being altogether. And then we're taught that then the rest of the time it's not doing anything, and actually it's a nuisance, right? And I'm like, that doesn't really sound true to me anymore after having my womb actually talk to me, right? And tell me I can give you all the energy that you need. And so I was beginning to write a lot about it, record meditations that were coming up for me to connect with that energy. And with that, it's not just an energy, it's an actual physicality too, because the womb is our bridge between the spirit world and the physical world. It's the portal that spirits come through to embody in a physical body, and continues to be that portal for our children through the age of 9, which is when they are, if in a healthy environment, when children are designed to fully embody their whole spirit. Before then, the mother is channeling their spirit through the womb to them. And so we have this capacity to transform spiritual energy or bring spiritual energy into physical form, to infuse physical form with spiritual energy. Hey, there's no reason why that's not happening other times besides when we're having children. And I don't personally have children, so it's like I needed to channel that energy. I needed to create something with that energy. And so I started, developing all these ideas and wanting to bring this as the focus of my work, my offering to the world, feeling that was a calling for me. And I started hearing the words womb awakening. Womb awakening was what I was going to call my website or my work. And so I started doing searches for womb awakening on the internet. And lo and behold, I found some folks that were that were writing a book called Womb Awakening, and that had an online apprenticeship called the Womb Awakening 9-Moon Apprenticeship. And eventually I said, okay, well, I got that insight that Womb Awakening is the nature of my work, and I liked these teachers, and so I started taking their apprenticeship. I eventually got certified as a certified Womb Awakening mentor through them, and I mentor their new students when they come in for the apprenticeship. And I've actually been an assistant teacher in person at one of their teacher trainings as well. So I really dove into that work, which focuses on this interface between the spiritual world and the physical world that the womb is. And so there's aspects of it of healing, bringing healing energy, going back through visionary shamanic journeying to the times that we were conceived, gestated, and born in our mother's womb, and bringing our healing wisdom to that time, as well as early childhood, as well as ancestral times, because through the womb we can connect back through our mother lineage to any traumatic experiences that our mother had, that our grandmother had, our great-grandmother, our great-great-grandmother. That's the whole origin of the 7 generations back and 7 generations forward. That is the Native American principle of live as though your actions affect 7 generations, which they do, because we pass down the genetic memory of anything that goes on in our life, especially through the mother lineage. And so we still have the capacity to also then, if we unwind a trauma pattern in our lives through whatever somatic healing practices or energy healing practices, if we're involving the womb in that process, the womb, first of all, gives us a whole set of resources that complement and complete our energy healing system. That includes, of course, the mind and the heart and the power center and all of this. But without including the womb at the full capacity, there's big missing pieces from a lot of energy healing systems that don't explicitly include the womb. And then we can bring that back through the lineage, our ancestral lineage. And I've had some amazing healing sessions for myself and with clients where we trace back a current wounding or trauma pattern that we're repeating or struggling with, right, that we're looking to bring healing to, and we trace it back. We ask the womb, when did this start? What's the origin? And we go back to, seeing an experience of someone that must be in our lineage, right, somewhere. We don't even know who they are necessarily, and we become the guardian angel of that ancestor in that moment of trauma. Mm. And I feel that that's what a lot of guardian angel experiences are, our descendants coming back.
Would you say that, talking about lineage, it's really fascinating, and I'm very curious because I've seen patterns of energy through people through past family members. And you talk about the feminine lineage, and I would think that there's a lot of damage in the feminine, and it's not like it's a surprise. And so to go back and to receive that healing now, I almost feel like, wouldn't that be almost like every single woman, like in the universe, in the planet, accessing that? Or maybe there are some people that don't need to. I don't know, but it just seems like, my gosh, like in history.
I actually met a woman recently who told me she didn't have any trauma growing up, and I didn't believe her.
Yeah.
I didn't believe her. And she told me a whole very convincing story about how wonderful her childhood was, and she's a therapist, and I'm like, how could you have grown up I mean, you're working with women who find themselves trapped in prostitution rings, and you're working with seriously traumatized persons. So maybe comparatively, it doesn't seem like you have much trauma. But but she described it all in very glowing terms about her childhood, and I'm like, you know what? I bet you've become a therapist because you have some ancestral trauma that, granted, your parents were really good at whatever they did to make it so that they weren't repeating those patterns. You had a brilliant mom. I grant you that, right? You had a brilliant mom who somehow found a way to extract herself. And some people are able to do that. They have horrendous ancestry, and they have some gift, and they're able to extract themselves and do whatever they needed to do and provide a different life for their children, right? And that's what we're counting on in order to heal any of this. We're counting on these intrinsic gifts that we awaken. That's why we call it womb awakening, is that there's an awakening that's happening collectively right now of our intrinsic womb power. You've heard the saying, you can't keep a good woman down. Well, you can't keep the womb down. I mean, the reason why we're still here as a species is because of just this infinite life generative power of the womb. If not, the self-destructive qualities of patriarchal structures would have destroyed us and killed us off long ago. But we've got this unsuppressible. I mean, look at all the extent to which the patriarchy, the effort to which the patriarchal domination model has had to exert to suppress the feminine. And that's
a really powerful statement. Yeah, it's so powerful that you say that, because I feel like, of course, with the internet, there is a lot of this, the culture of femininity and where does it fit. And I was just actually at a conversation with a fertility friend coach yesterday, and we talked about the gurus and the doctors, and they happen to be male. There's a lot going around about the John of God, who's a lot of New Age and a lot of spiritualists know this. The assault against women, and at the same time, I was telling my friend that in not too far in here, where I am in Pasadena, there's a doctor who's been practicing OBGYN for years and was also accused of hundreds of women being sexually assaulted. And I was like, what is the theme here of the doctor, of course, worshiping the doctor, the male doctor, has all the answers. And then this other spiritual guru was like, what makes them so different? And then I said, what happened to the feminine? That's what I started getting a little agitated about. And I love the way you said that, is that there's that trying to suppress all the time, and then we keep rising and energy keeps shifting, and it hasn't. But you're right, if there was no more females, there'd be no more people.
And that's the thing. Right. And that's the thing, we can trace back, and maybe this is for another discussion, but we can trace back the origins of patriarchy. And there are some theories that resonate for me about a huge cataclysm on the planet at a certain point. Because for 300,000 years in the archaeological record, we had matrilineal societal structures that were based on partnership between men and women in the family unit, the basic family unit. And then something happened, and we started to see these violent patriarchal takeovers and warring and all of this, which was non-existent before then. Okay? And so why did that start happening? And there are some theories about how a huge asteroid hit the planet, and the Gulf of Mexico and a lot of the caves in the Yucatan are geological evidence that this indeed occurred, and that knocked the planet off of its rotational axis to a degree that suddenly now we have seasonal weather changes. Whereas before, there were not seasonal weather changes. Everybody was where there was food all the time, year-round. No one had to plan anything. We could be in this lovely dream state with a union between the subconscious and the logical mind. And that trauma made a split between the subconscious and the logical mind, which is a recently recognized result of trauma, that can split your logical and subconscious mind, because there's so much that goes on in the subconscious mind, and we dissociate from that ability to sense and feel everything in order to cope with trauma. And so that early trauma in our human development was a shock to our collective system, and the people who were able to dissociate the most from the subconscious mind to be able to really get into the logical mind of making a plan and figuring out how to control the environment and like that, became these male priests who would then protect the tribe and from the people who had just completely lost it and were trying to steal other people's stuff and kind of going crazy and all this, right? And so that was the beginning of the warring and the fighting for resources, and this patriarchal, logical thinking based, the priesthood then sort of took over and suppressed the feminine, the subconscious mind, and therefore the feminine as well, because it's too hard to deal with the emotional side of things when you're needing to respond to a current danger and trauma. You're still in current trauma. You can't deal with it, so you have to suppress it. And so at the beginning, the patriarchal response to the situation was very adaptive and helped us survive.
Mm.
And so that, for me, when I realized that aspect of that theory, it was like, oh, yeah, well, of course, that's just like my personal early childhood trauma and some of the coping strategies that I developed as a child of isolating myself, pushing people away, keeping my feelings secret.
Mm. So there's layers, to the story.
Yeah.
And when we talk about lineage here, because I've had someone ask me this before, and I was like, I'm thinking that it's let's say, my feminine lineage. Am I looking more at my dad's mother or my mom's mother? How does that work? Since I'm both part my mom and my dad, or do you go back 14, 7 and 7?
Yeah, it's not that much of a plan.
Okay.
So when I do ancestral healing work with people, we ask the womb. We start with a current circumstance that we're struggling with. So say, for example, you have an intense emotion that comes up regularly that seems bigger than the current circumstances. Okay, one person that I worked with had an intense fear reaction that was way bigger than the current circumstances merited. And she knew it, and she knew she was reacting in fear. And so we sat down and we did a session, and we asked the womb, okay, when was the first time that you felt this fear? We get really familiar with the flavor of the fear, the smell of the fear, the sensation of the fear in the body. We, get real familiar with it, and then we can recognize it and say, when was the first time you had this fear? And the client said, well, it was, I've always had it. And I said, okay, did you get it from your mother? Yes. When was the first time she had this fear? She's always had it. Did she get it from her mother? Yes. When was the first time her mother had this fear? She's always had it. Did she get it from her mother? Yes. When was the first time she had this fear? Since she was 3 years old. What happened when she was 3 years old? And then we're transported shamanically to the experience of this 3-year-old great-great-grandmother, right?
Wow.
Now, that's one way to do it, which I've since refined the process to just say, okay, womb, can you show us the first time, the origin of this emotional pattern in this ancestral lineage? Because sometimes it goes back a lot more generations, and we'd be sitting there, was this the first, did she always have it? Was this the first time? Was she always have it? we'd be going back and we'd be mapping it out, and it would take a long time during the session, you know. So I've just streamlined it and say, you know, take us to the first time. And I had another client where we just arrived at the moment when a young boy was having a traumatic experience, and we knew it was in the lineage at some point, but we weren't sure. It could have been the father's lineage, it could have been the mother's lineage, but we arrived as the guardian angel. We bring our wisest self, because here we are, generations down the line, much safer, with much more rich resources and healing understanding and awareness. You know, many of my clients have been studying energy healing and, you know, body work and healing birth, you know, and all of this. So we've got all of these healing resources, and it's no surprise that these ancestral wounds are coming up into our field, because finally the healing resources are available today that were not available in those lifetimes back in our ancestry. They just were not available. We hadn't developed them yet. We didn't learn about them yet. And so I feel it's our responsibility now as healers to pay attention to that, and not just say, oh, you know, a lot of the focus on the positive spiritual teachings, though at the core attend to these recurring patterns. Many people use them to bypass the healing that actually needs to occur, and that comes into that field of positivity and keeps coming into that field of positivity, because that's where it's safe to arise. And if we use the positivity focus to say, oh, that's just a negative thought, I'm not going to be in fear, as opposed to saying, oh, welcome, like a scared child, how can I bring my medicine to you? Right?
Yeah, as you're speaking, there's so many like questions like running through my head, and you're like making me even like kind of look at my own like story. I'm like, oh yeah, that's my story. For me, it's actually hard to go beyond the current mom, because it's like there's just so much stuff. But I'm sure she embodies that through, you know, whatever generations. And I almost feel like there's so much lost information on some level where, I don't know, I almost feel like there's such a disconnect in that. But I remember years ago when I started doing healing work on myself, I got into this phase where it was way before children. It was like, I'm just going to healers, different healers people recommended, like these really secret, like underground healers, which did really intense work. And it was really good. And this one woman, I remember laying there and she was next to me. She's like, I'm going to like channel into your body. I was like, okay, let's do whatever. And I remember shaking. And I said, I'm really cold. You need a blanket. And she was like, no, you don't need a blanket. It's energy. And, you know, obviously moving forward years later, it was like, oh, yeah, I was not cold, but it felt so cold. And what she helped me release in my sacral in that womb space was a lot of my mom stuff. And she even asked me at one point, and I've had people say this when I was younger, do you have fibroids? Have you had an abortion? Which is very like, oh, what? No. What does that mean if I didn't have that? And that's what you're seeing? And, you know, realizing that there was a lot of trauma down there. Maybe they were misinterpreting the energy of it, because I did actually have trauma as a child in a accident, a sledding accident. And so I kind of tore like inward into my body. And so maybe that's the trauma they were picking up. And then on top of that, I'm holding my mom's traumas of her sexuality, her sexual abuse. And a lot of people don't really, I was at one point when I was pregnant, and I had birth phobia, like pregnancy, like giving birth phobia. And I'm like, this is big. I'm like, this is more than just, I'm like, women are scared to give birth, sure. But mine was like really deep. And I'm like, something else is going on. I didn't really know, because I don't know if I really wanted to know. And I remember looking for books at one point on there's some people, and I'm sure you know, that are writing about, maybe it's Penny Simkin, I don't know, I don't remember who it was, who wrote a book about the sexual abuse and in giving birth and pregnancy. And it's a really intense read. It's not, I feel like it's very academic. It's not a book I would actually recommend to a lot of people unless they're like a midwife or like a doctor or in like therapy, psychology. And I was like looking in this book, trying to figure out for myself, like what about the person that has the mother that's been sexually traumatized, and my mom was also mentally ill. And then you get that energy, like, and I'm empathic, so I almost was like, I didn't know how to separate it, her story from my story. And it was always fight around that for years and years and years. And I still feel like my sacral is broken. I still feel like it's fixing, or it's like it's healing. And so, you know, just.
Well, the thing is, Kelly, what I want to share about that, because this is central to the work that I do with women around womb awakening, because the reason that we get so bogged down with carrying the wounds of our mother and our grandmother and our great-grandmother, you know, there's a couple of reasons. One is what I just was describing, that here we are, we're at a moment when we're in a state of being where we're collectively discovering and developing healing processes that just weren't available then, right? So those traumas are going to keep coming forward for us to heal. The other reason this goes on, even after we recognize all that and bring healing energy to it, is that we are taught to only use a limited amount of the powers of the womb outside of childbirth. But even during childbirth, and this is one of the reasons why many women have trouble with childbirth, is that what we're taught how to be as women emotionally only validates certain powers of the womb and atrophies other powers of the womb. So it validates and strengthens some aspects of the womb and atrophies and weakens others. So we're taught to exercise our womb strength, our womb powers, only in an imbalanced way. So it's like you're only allowed to use your left leg, right? As you say, you're only allowed to use your left leg, and we're going to exercise that left leg because that left leg is going to get you through. That's what you're supposed to do. Pretty soon you're going to be a pretty lopsided person. You're going to have all kinds of health issues, right? Structural issues. Well, that's what's going on in our womb. And our womb is not just a physical organ. It's an emotional organ. It's a spiritual organ. So when we're taught that we're supposed to hold on to our emotions, and we're supposed to carry other people's emotions for them, and hold on to them, and just hold them. Now, this is a legitimate power of the womb. We can hold something inside of us, nourish it, let it grow, let it develop, let it change, let it transform, right? This is a legitimate power of the womb. Well, it's also balanced with when it's time for that thing to come out, the womb knows how to push that baby out, right? And differentiate between what belongs to the baby and what belongs to the mother. The placenta is this magical organ that hooks up all the blood vessels and filters out what's, you know, during the gestational period, what belongs to the baby, what's good to give to the baby or not good to give to the baby. It has all of these amazing powers of healthy, in a healthy system, healthy boundaries between the mother and the baby that also allow for this beautiful nourishing and merging as well, having another being inside of you, right? The womb has this complex system of holding another being, another creature inside of us, and having healthy boundaries within that. And it also has this power of, let's get this out. It's time for that being to be on its own. It's time to differentiate and say, this is the mother and this is the baby. And in a healthy system, that differentiation does not harm the mother and does not harm the baby, and gives the baby everything it needs and retains everything for the mother that she needs.
Now, I'm curious as you
let me just.
Yeah. Okay, go ahead.
I'm trying to get to a whole point here in that power of the womb is underemphasized in the way that we're taught to be as women. We're not taught how to have healthy boundaries. We're taught to just hold people inside of us and hold other people's emotions inside of us. Yes. Our mothers didn't know how to do that. They didn't know how to teach us that. And so that part of the womb gets atrophied, and that shows up, of course, in trouble during childbirth, and you know what happens when that doesn't happen properly in our wombs, physically, physiologically. But I say that sourced in our we haven't been encouraged to learn how to do that, because if we wouldn't have codependent relationships.
Mm-hmm.
We would have relationships with healthy boundaries. And we would know when it was time to nurture somebody and hold someone's feelings inside of us, and then we would also know when it was healthiest for us and for the other person to say, you know what, I'm going to let you hold this now, and give it back to them. But we didn't have that modeled to us when we were children. So I'm sorry, I just had to get to that point. But
no, it's so profound. Everything you're saying is so profound, and I feel like those that are tuning in are going to just really benefit so much. I'm sure people will even be contacting you, because this is a big part. I feel like, as there's so many questions running through my mind, but I do want to talk about conception, because a high percentage of women and couples that I see from around the world do come with conception issues, with intervention, with trying natural, IVF, older, and there's so many different elements and I have seen lineage with some people, and I do know the energetic connection of the sacral, how it does speak. And when I tune in, the uterus and the ovaries, they do share not just to see physical issues, but the emotional and the spiritual connection to that. And I love how you take this kind of somatic journey with people, because I do that with people more extensively, where it's like, where is your womb? What is that connection? And I actually do find a lot of women have never even considered, even though they're maybe going on 3, 4, 5 years of conception, and with so much emotion around that, and never actually stop to really talk to their womb or really build that relationship or connection, or what's that about, or what I like to say is be curious with it and see, what feelings come up. But, conception, I mean, I don't know if there's more struggle or if we're just talking about it more. But I want to hear, your experience with, there's a lot of people have a lot of mixed feelings about IVF, and especially as as you're someone, what I would consider like a healer, or someone that's, of support to women in a way, where I've had some women come, and some healers are against IVF, which doesn't make sense because it's not one's business. And there is that fine line of abuse with IVF, but that's the choice of the person as well. And what can you say about conception, or that struggle? Because we talk about this bowl of, this holding container in our bodies, and this generation. I like what you said, life-generating organ. But then what about people also with miscarriage? And I'm sure there's so many layers to that for people.
Yeah, there are. And the thing is, our wombs are suffering because of this backlog of wounding, and because of how we're taught to care for ourselves physically, or not taught, and emotionally and spiritually. So just focusing in on the physical, which is a great map for the emotional and spiritual, because we can see it, we can touch it, we can feel it. And then I use what I call biomysticism, where I look at what's going on physiologically and take that as a symbol, use that as a symbol for what's going on very likely in the emotional and spiritual realm. So when we tell young girls, when they, first of all, don't prepare young girls adequately, or honor or celebrate young girls who are coming into menarche, their first menstruation. Instead, we tell them, yes, you're going to be able to get pregnant, which you don't want to do, and you shouldn't be exploring your sexuality anyway. It's dangerous to do so. The boys aren't going to respect you or take care of you. And you really don't want anyone to see your blood ever. And here are ways to plug it up, stop it, make sure it doesn't leak out on your clothing. No one wants to see or smell your blood, so let's put some deodorant in your pads as well. And it's really a curse and a nuisance, and, just try not to let it get in the way of the important things that you're doing in your life. which is very different than saying, oh, you have become a woman now. You have this amazing power of creating new life. Let's celebrate you. And having seen all of the other women, young women in her life be celebrated before her, the ones older than her, and having heard stories of the amazing emotional, spiritual, and physical power of the womb, and celebrated and being ready to take on this new phase of her life, and being taught how the rhythms of her cycles are a superpower, and how listening to them is going to generate creative life force energy in her life and for everyone that she touches. I mean, it's so different, the reality, the truth of what's going on for young women than what they're told, than what we're told. And so from the get-go, we're not taught how to care for our bodies, our emotions, or our spirits as women at all, in any way, shape, or form. And then we're supposed to just carry on when we're trying to plug it up. We don't know how to encourage and support the natural physiological function of shedding the endometrial lining every month. We don't know how to support that in an emotional way and in a spiritual way, too, of how important that is emotionally and spiritually, to give ourselves that time to shed whatever we're holding in there for other people and for ourselves, emotionally and spiritually. We're not taught any of that. And it's no wonder that our wombs end up unable to conceive because of the backlog of all this stuff that it's holding in there. There's no room for a baby. So my sense of people that are having fertility issues is let's, if you really want to conceive, whether it's IVF or not, I'm assuming you're talking about in vitro fertilization. You do in vitro fertilization and then put that fertilized egg in the womb. If your womb is clogged up with all this other stuff that was preventing the fertilization from happening in the first place, you're going to have trouble even sustaining that.
And so I see that a lot. I see that a lot.
So I work with and the same with miscarriage. The womb, the baby is able to grow to a certain degree, but because there's all this other stuff that the woman has not learned how to, and hasn't been encouraged to really go with, and nobody has in our culture to really honor and flow with the natural rhythms of our bodies, and celebrate the natural rhythms of our bodies, and really live that on all levels. And we get all this back. It's like if we were taught that eliminating your bowels is an inconvenience, so here, plug it up. It's a little different, but it's kind of the same thing, our bodies
it's a good visual.
and that's what we're doing with our wombs, and then we're surprised when it gets backed up and it can't function as it's designed.
Even when you say that, I think about, I've talked to a lot of women after childbirth, just even mom friends and stuff, and everyone has like a pelvic floor issue. And I said, because there's no one here that tells us. Our culture is like, oh, you go to the OBGYN, which they don't do pelvic muscular awareness. They don't do emotional work. And so I just realized, and you've probably seen this, even just going ahead, even into menopause, right, menopause, is that a lot of women I'm hearing, they're said that their vaginas fall out of their body. And there's probably more of a technical term for that.
Well,
and I'm going, I don't want that to happen. I was like, the prolapse seems like almost like it's like it almost seems like it's going to happen. Like everyone I'm hearing, I'm like a little bit frightened, to be honest. I'm going, oh, am I next? Is that me? It's like, what is that? And I want to,
There are ancient practices, and I'm specifically talking about vaginal steaming. Okay, vaginal steaming is an ancient, gentle practice that any woman can do just with with ingredients and tools from her very own kitchen. No fancy procedure, no need for any doctor. That it's an ancient practice that's practiced all over the world. In some cultures today that have an unbroken lineage of this practice, it's actually considered a crime, and families who don't give their birthing mothers vaginal steaming treatments postpartum are ostracized from the tribe because it's considered criminal to not provide this for birthing mothers because of the health issues that occur when women don't have vaginal steaming and proper postpartum care.
So we just need to implement
because we're reclaiming these practices from
I think we lost you. Don't hear.
Hi, can you hear me now?
Oh, there you are. Yes, there you are.
Sorry about that. I had a glitch on my phone. But yeah, so there we have it. We just need to implement these practices that we're reclaiming.
I know it's a lot of women when they come to me with birth loss, especially miscarriage, sometimes stillbirth, there's such a lack of preparation, even around miscarriage, that early loss. I imagine like steaming would be really amazing for it, and different methods to bring a wholeness. And I know in other cultures there are more of a ritual or some kind of self-care that's more, like you're saying, more prominent, or it's like it's more natural. And I always wonder, even just in American culture, because I know there are people that tune in from all around the world, and we can only speak from our own culture. And I know here it just feels like, I don't know, sometimes things just feel all over the place, and they feel like they're just old energies of thought. And then I always wonder, where is this new stuff going to come, and how can we really, nurture each other? I mean, that's a big question. I don't even know if there's really an answer for that one.
Yeah.
But, coming back to this womb space, I want to see what, before we're coming to the end, oh my gosh, there's so many questions. Because I see there's so much stuff you've touched on about the womb, and just even, even what I noticed, like culturally, like it seems like everything is geared towards, the womb, and you don't hear a lot of stuff about, the male energy of like their testicles, or it's always about the womb and the cancer of the womb, the organs are being taken out, the hysterectomy. It's like all this stuff is like a really, that again, that's probably like a very big conversation to have.
It is, and what I'll say about that is that the reason that we see that, although we're probably going to start seeing more about male anatomy as men are starting to step forward and take more responsibility for this, for their part in the whole reproductive dance, right? But the main reason that we see that medically is that until 1990 in this country, women were deliberately excluded from medical research. Because our bodies are so different, and it would mess up their results that they wanted to get. But then the medications and the procedures were then given to women and done on women, even though they were excluded from the research. So the medical, Western medical, drug-oriented, sort of industrialized, machinery oriented, male-oriented medicine was based on the model of the male body. And then until only just recently. And the thing is, the things that really help women the most are things that they're going to be able to implement themselves on a daily basis. So vaginal steaming, for example, we're having to hold bake sales and do crowdfunding to fund the research, because no pharmaceutical company, which is where most medical research gets funded from, is going to want to research this treatment that any woman can do in her own kitchen with the spices she uses in her cooking. And that is and that is actually more effective than the drug-based, surgery-based treatments that gynecologists have to offer, only after it becomes so extreme that you're having major debilitation. If we are connecting with our womb regularly from the get-go, then we only need, very gentle things. And even if we have something extreme, these gentle things are very powerful. The womb is very responsive to gentle support.
So before we're coming to an end, is there any tips, anything you can offer women to, and maybe it's just a small piece of how can a woman really begin to address her womb space if she's never even considered that's a part of her?
Yeah, one of the first things that I share with women is something called womb listening. And it's very simple. You can place your hands on your belly and just take a few breaths and bring your awareness to that area of your body. And the womb resides just behind the pubic bone, and it sort of lays flat in the pelvis. So it goes back towards your spine. So it's kind of between your pubic bone and your sacrum. And just feeling that area of your body, giving yourself a few moments and asking, what do you have to tell me? What is here? And so if that kind of, feeling-based self-inquiry is new to someone, it can just be, a few moments of breathing and feeling, putting the hands on the belly, taking those few moments. And that can produce profound insight and awareness. And it can also take a while for a connection to start to occur because, if you've been ignoring something or someone for a long time, it's not used to being listened to, so it doesn't really believe you at first.
Yeah. That's a very good tip there. And I want you, now we're coming to the end, I want you to share any last words, but also ways that others can contact you, your website, email, as well as any upcoming programs, events, or things that you have happening.
Okay, yeah. It's great that we talked so much about the mother-daughter lineage relationship and the whole bit about strengthening this womb power of differentiation has been profound for me because it affects all of our relationships. And so I really want to encourage women to start to reflect on that and start to notice how we take other people's emotions on and how that can be helpful and healthy for them, but also to inquire in ourselves, how much of that can we really do and still be healthy in ourselves without also paying attention to this, understanding that this belongs to them and having healthy boundaries around that too, especially empaths and, spiritual energy healing practitioners. We've developed that ability to merge to a high degree and often need to develop this other ability of creating healthy boundaries and giving things back to people that belong to them. So those would be my words of wisdom, and I actually have a healing circle coming up on Monday, actually, the 21st of January, 2019, at in the afternoon. I think it's 5 p.m. Pacific time. It's the Mother-Daughter Healing Circle we're having. People in my group, my womb-centered healing temple, somebody actually wrote to me and said, can we do a Mother-Daughter Healing Circle? Because we've been doing various healing circles. And so we've been talking about this differentiation process. We've been talking about the mother-daughter relationship. So that healing circle will be happening then. And folks can look for that on my website at, what is my website? wombcenteredhealing.com. Okay, so you'll see that that's where the site of the Womb-Centered Healing Temple. And if you look in the menu, you'll find the Womb-Centered Healing Circles and be able to sign up for that.
Wonderful.
And I also have a Facebook group if people want to join the temple in that way. If you enjoy being part of Facebook groups, you can look for the Womb-Centered Healing Temple Facebook group and join in the conversation there.
Thank you so much, Salma, for being here. It was such a beautiful, insightful, and rich conversation. I feel like we could keep talking about this for hours and days. It's such powerful services that you offer. And again, thank you so much for being here at Spirit Baby Radio.
Yes, thank you for having me.
This is Spirit Baby Radio. Thank you for joining Kelly in the energy of awareness, love, healing, and soul communication. Please join the next episode at www.soulbabycommunication.com.